El ranchero quest salvo a dos niñas Apache, why ellas regresaron para amarlo. The rancher lived far from towns and busy roads, in a wide land where the ground was dry and the sky felt endless. His ranch sat between low hills and open fields, shaped by years of wind and sun. Every morning he woke before the light touched the land. The air was cool and the world felt quiet as if it was holding its breath. He liked that silence. It gave him time to think, even though most of his thoughts stayed locked deep inside his heart. He was a man of routine. After waking up, he washed his face with cold water, fed his horse, and checked the cattle. He walked slowly but with purpose, his boots pressing into the dust he knew so well. Each fence post, each tree, each path was familiar to him. He had built most of the ranch with his own hands. The ranch was not rich or beautiful in the way cities were, but it was honest. It gave back only what was earned through effort and patience. People in nearby settlements knew him as a quiet man. He did not talk much, but when he did, his words were calm and respectful. He never caused trouble. He paid fairly, helped when he could, and stayed away from arguments. Some thought he was cold, others thought he was proud. In truth, he was simply tired. Life had taught him early that loving too deeply could leave lasting pain. Years before, his life had been different. He once had a family, a small home filled with laughter and warmth. But fate had taken that life away piece by piece. Loss came quietly, then all at once. After that, he chose the ranch far away from everything familiar, not because he hated people, but because silence hurt less than memories. On the ranch, he could breathe without being reminded of what he no longer had. At night, he often sat outside his cabin, staring at the stars. The sky above the ranch was clear, filled with lights that seemed close enough to touch. He wondered how something so beautiful could exist in a world that caused so much pain. Sometimes, old memories tried to return. He would feel them rising, but he pushed them away, focusing instead on the sounds of the land. The wind, the animals, the distant call of night birds. Though he lived alone, he was not careless. The land around him could be harsh. The sun could burn during the day and the cold could bite at night. He learned to respect nature, not fight it. When storms came, he prepared. When drought lasted too long, he adjusted. This understanding made him strong in a quiet way, not loud or proud, but steady. Despite his lonely life, he still carried kindness inside him. It showed in small ways. He left water out for travelers. He helped injured animals even when it cost him time and effort. When strangers passed through, he offered directions or food without asking questions. He did not believe in turning his back on someone in need. That belief had stayed with him, even after life had tried to break it. Some evenings, when the wind was soft and the land rested, he felt a deep emptiness. He wondered if this was all life would be for him. Work, silence, sleep, and then the same again. He told himself this was enough. That peace was better than hope, because hope could disappoint. Still, a part of him wished for something more, even if he refused to admit it out loud. The rancher had no idea that his quiet life was about to change. He could not see the future waiting just beyond his land. He did not know that one ordinary day would bring a moment that would test his heart and awaken feelings he believed were gone forever. Fate does not ask for permission. It arrives when least expected. That morning began like all others. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky in soft colors. He saddled his horse and set out to check a distant part of his land near a dry stream. The path was rough, but he knew it well. As he rode, he thought about simple things, repairs that needed to be done, weather signs, and how much water the cattle would need in the coming days. As he moved farther from the ranch, the silence felt heavier than usual. Even the birds seemed quiet. He noticed small signs on the ground that felt out of place, but he did not stop. He believed the land would speak clearly if something was wrong. He trusted that instinct, the same one that had kept him alive through many hard years. He stopped near the stream to let his horse drink from the small pool of water left behind. He wiped his brow and looked around. The land stretched endlessly, empty and still. For a moment, he felt completely alone in the world. Not lonely, just small. He took a deep breath and prepared to turn back. Then, faint and weak, a sound reached his ears. At first he thought it was the wind, but the sound came again, soft and broken like a cry struggling to survive. He froze. His heart beat faster. No animal he knew made that sound. It was something else, something human. He listened closely, letting the world fall silent around him. The sound came once more, clearer now. His body reacted before his mind could. He stepped down from his horse and followed the sound toward a cluster of rocks near the stream. With each step, the sound grew stronger. Fear and concern mixed inside him. He did not know what he would find, but he knew he could not turn away. Whatever waited ahead, his quiet life was already breaking apart. As he reached the rocks, his breath caught in his throat. Something lay hidden there, fragile and small. The rancher stood still, feeling a heavy weight settle in his chest. In that moment, he understood one simple truth. From this point forward, nothing would ever be the same again. He did not yet know who he was about to meet or how deeply their lives would connect. But fate had finally stepped into his lonely world, and it had chosen him for a reason. The rancher stood still for several seconds, his heart beating hard as he looked at what was hidden among the rocks. Slowly, carefully, he moved closer. What he saw made his chest tighten. Two small girls were lying there, close together, holding onto each other as if that was the only thing keeping them safe. Their clothes were torn and dusty. Their faces were dirty, and their eyes were wide with fear. They looked up at him at the same time. One of them tried to move back, but she was too weak. The other reached out and grabbed her sister's arm, pulling her close. They did not cry loudly now. Instead, they watched him in silence, breathing fast, ready to run if they could. The rancher raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. He had seen fear like this before, long ago, in people who had lost everything. He spoke softly, even though he knew they could not understand his words. His voice was calm, low, and steady. He knelt down a few steps away so he would not seem too tall or threatening. He noticed their condition right away. They were tired, thirsty, and hurt. One girl had a cut on her leg. The other was shaking, not from cold but from fear and hunger. They were children, far too young to be alone in such a harsh place. It was clear they had been walking for a long time. The rancher looked around the area. There were no adults nearby, no horses, no signs of a camp, just empty land and the weak sound of the wind. He understood then that these girls had been separated from their people. How or why, he did not know, but he knew one thing clearly: if he left them there, they would not survive. For a moment, doubt tried to enter his mind. Helping them would not be simple. It could bring trouble. People in the region often feared what they did not understand. Taking in two children from another culture could lead to questions, anger, or worse. The rancher was used to living quietly. He had built his life around avoiding conflict. But as he looked at the girls, that doubt faded. He remembered his own past, the pain of loss, the feeling of being alone in a world that did not stop to care. He could not turn his back now, not on children, not on anyone so clearly in need. Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out a piece of dried food. He held it out gently and waited. The girls watched it carefully. Hunger fought against fear in their eyes. After a few moments, the older girl reached forward and took it. She did not speak, but she nodded slightly, a small sign of trust. The younger girl followed, eating slowly, as if afraid the food might disappear. The rancher waited until they were calmer. Then he pointed toward his horse and made simple gestures to show that he could take them somewhere safe. The girls looked at each other. They did not fully understand, but they understood enough. Staying here was not an option. Helping them onto the horse took time. They were weak, and he had to be careful not to scare them. He lifted them gently, as if they were made of glass. Once they were settled, he walked beside the horse instead of riding, holding the reins and moving slowly back toward the ranch. The journey felt longer than usual. The sun was high and the land offered little shade. The girls stayed quiet, holding onto each other and watching everything around them. The rancher could feel their fear, but also their strength. They had survived something terrible and they were still here. When the ranch finally came into view, the girls stiffened again. New places brought new fears. The rancher stopped and spoke softly once more. He showed them the animals, the water trough, the open space. He wanted them to see that this place was calm, not dangerous. Inside the small cabin, he gave them water first. They drank slowly, carefully. Then he cleaned their wounds as best he could. He used clean cloth, warm water, and gentle hands. The girls winced but did not pull away. That trust, small as it was, touched him deeply. As the hours passed, the girls began to relax. They sat near the wall, watching him move around the cabin. He cooked simple food and placed it near them. They ate quietly, their movements slow and tired. Afterward, exhaustion took over. They lay down on blankets and fell asleep almost at once. The rancher sat nearby, watching them. The cabin felt different now, warmer, fuller. Sounds that had been missing for years were suddenly there, breathing, soft movement, the presence of life. It stirred something inside him that he had kept buried for a long time. As night fell, questions filled his mind. Who were they? Where had they come from? Were their families still alive? He knew they were from a native tribe, likely moving through the land as they had for generations. Conflicts in the region were common. People were pushed from their homes, forced to move, often losing loved ones along the way. He knew he could not keep them forever. That was not his choice to make. His responsibility was to keep them safe until they could be reunited with their people. Still, the thought of sending them away already caused a quiet ache in his chest. That night, he barely slept. Every small sound made him sit up, checking to make sure the girls were still there, still safe. He felt a strange mix of fear and purpose. Fear of what might happen next, and purpose because, for the first time in years, someone depended on him. In the days that followed, the rancher adjusted his routine. He stayed close to the cabin. He brought water more often. He spoke gently, even when the girls did not understand his words. He learned their names through gestures and repetition. Slowly, they learned his. Trust grew little by little. The girls began to smile. They followed him outside, watching how he worked, how he treated animals, how he respected the land. They began to believe they were safe. The rancher knew the road ahead would not be easy. Helping them meant facing the world again, a world he had kept at a distance for many years. But as he watched the girls laugh quietly over something small, he understood something important. Saving them had already changed him, and this was only the beginning. The days passed slowly, but each day felt different from the one before. The rancher noticed changes not only in the girls, but also in himself. His mornings no longer began in silence. Soft footsteps, quiet whispers, and the sound of movement filled the air around the cabin. The ranch, which had once felt empty and still, now felt alive. At first, the girls stayed close to each other at all times. They followed the rancher with careful eyes, always ready to step back if they felt unsure. He understood their fear. He never rushed them or raised his voice. He moved slowly, spoke gently, and allowed them to decide how close they wanted to be. Every small action mattered. When he poured water, he made sure they saw it was clean. When he cooked food, he let them watch so they would not be afraid. He placed food on the table and stepped back, giving them space. Trust, he knew, was not given quickly. It was built one careful moment at a time. As their strength returned, the girls began to explore the area around the cabin. They touched the wooden walls, the tools, and the simple objects inside the home. Everything was new to them. Sometimes they asked questions using gestures and expressions. He answered the best he could, pointing, smiling, and showing instead of telling. Language was a challenge, but not an impossible one. They learned words by repetition. He said the names of objects slowly, again and again. Water, bread, horse, sky. They listened closely and repeated the sounds, sometimes laughing when they said them wrong. Their laughter was soft but honest, and every time he heard it, something warm stirred in his chest. The rancher showed them how he worked. He let them watch as he fed the animals, repaired fences, and carried water. He never asked them to help, but sometimes they did anyway. One would bring him a small tool. The other would sit nearby and watch carefully as if trying to understand how the world worked. Animals played a big role in building trust. The girls were afraid at first, especially of the larger animals, but they saw how gently the rancher treated them. He spoke calmly to his horse, patted its neck, and moved with patience. Slowly the girls began to reach out too. Touching the animals made them smile. It gave them comfort. In the evenings, they sat together outside the cabin as the sun went down. The rancher would point to the sky, showing them the changing colors. The girls shared stories in their own way, using hand movements and facial expressions. Even without words, he could tell they were speaking about their past, about journeys, about people they missed. Sometimes those moments were heavy. The girls' faces would grow quiet. Their eyes would lower. He could feel the sadness in the air. He did not ask questions. He simply stayed with them, letting them know they were not alone. Presence, he had learned, was sometimes more powerful than words. At night, the girls slept inside the cabin, wrapped in blankets. The rancher slept nearby, always listening. Every sound made him alert. Protecting them had become natural, like breathing. He did not question it. He did not resist it. He accepted it as part of his life now. As days turned into weeks, the girls grew healthier. Their steps became stronger. Their eyes became brighter. They smiled more often and laughed freely. The rancher noticed how they watched him when they thought he was not looking. There was curiosity in their eyes and something else too, a quiet trust that had slowly grown into comfort. He also noticed changes in himself. He spoke more. He smiled more. He found himself telling small stories, even if the girls could not fully understand them. He had not spoken like that in years. His voice had grown used to silence, but now it remembered how to carry warmth. The ranch no longer felt like a place of escape. It felt like a place of connection. Still, a shadow remained in his thoughts. He knew this could not last forever. The girls had a people, a culture, a place where they belonged. Keeping them hidden was not right. As much as he cared for them, he knew his role was temporary. This understanding brought a quiet pain he did not speak about. One afternoon, the older girl noticed his distant expression. She walked over and placed something small in his hand. It was a simple object she had made from bits of grass and string. A gift. He looked at it for a long moment, then closed his hand around it. His eyes filled, but he smiled. That small gesture meant more than she could ever know. The rancher began thinking about how to help them return safely. He remembered traders and travelers who sometimes passed through nearby areas. People who knew the land, the tribes, the paths. He knew it would take time and care. He would not rush it. Their safety mattered more than anything. Until then, he focused on the present. One day, a storm rolled in suddenly. Dark clouds filled the sky and strong winds swept across the land. The girls became frightened. Storms reminded them of fear and uncertainty. The rancher gathered them inside the cabin, secured the doors, and stayed close. He spoke calmly, his voice steady and reassuring. As rain hit the roof, the girls huddled near him. Without thinking, he placed a comforting hand on their shoulders. They did not pull away. Instead, they leaned closer. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a bond stronger than fear. When the storm passed, the land smelled fresh and clean. The girls stepped outside and laughed, watching water drip from the roof. The rancher watched them, realizing how deeply they had become part of his life. He thought of the man he had been before they arrived, quiet, closed off, surviving but not truly living. And then he looked at who he was now, a protector, a teacher, a listener. A man who cared again. That night, as the girls slept peacefully, the rancher sat outside under the stars. He held the small gift in his hand and stared at the sky. He understood that love did not always come in the way people expected. Sometimes it arrived through responsibility, through choice, through kindness. He did not know how the story would end. He only knew that these days mattered. That whatever happened next, this time would stay with him forever. The quiet rancher was no longer alone, and deep in his heart, he knew that even when the day came to let go, the connection they had built would never truly disappear. Time passed quickly. though the rancher and the girls barely noticed it. Each day brought small joys: the soft laughter of the girls as they explored the land, the quiet satisfaction of chores done together, and the peaceful evenings spent under the open sky. The ranch had become a place of safety and warmth, a shelter not just for the girls but for the rancher's own heart as well. Yet behind the calm, a quiet truth lingered: they could not stay together forever. The rancher had begun to make arrangements. He knew the girls had a people, a tribe who would be searching for them. He also knew that keeping them longer than necessary would only create more fear, more confusion. But the thought of sending them away filled him with a sadness he could not shake. He had come to love them in the simplest, truest way, by caring for them, protecting them, teaching them, and sharing his quiet life. One afternoon, he received news from a traveler passing nearby. There were people who could guide the girls back safely to their village. He felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief, because the girls would finally return to their family and culture. Sorrow, because he would have to say goodbye to the two small lives that had become part of his own. The rancher tried to focus on the task ahead. He wanted the reunion to be smooth, safe, and gentle. The days leading to their departure were filled with quiet preparation. He taught the girls simple ways to remember him: gestures, a song, small movements that would carry his presence with them even when he was not there. They packed their small belongings carefully, using blankets and containers he had helped them gather. The girls were unusually quiet during this time, sensing that change was coming. Even though they had laughed, explored, and grown under his care, they now faced the unknown. The rancher tried to fill their last days together with comfort. They walked along the paths they had come to know, feeding animals and watching the sunrise together one last time. He told small stories, gestures of wisdom about the land, and lessons he had learned from years alone. The girls listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes serious, understanding more than words could express. Their bond, built over weeks of care, trust, and quiet love, was now stronger than ever. The day finally arrived. A small group came to guide the girls back to their village. They were friendly, respectful, and gentle. The rancher watched them carefully as they approached, his heart heavy with the weight of the farewell. The girls clung to him for a moment longer than he expected, their small hands gripping his coat and sleeves. Their eyes, wide and shining, held unspoken words: gratitude, fear, love, and sorrow all mixed together. He knelt down to their level, speaking softly. Even though they could not fully understand his words, his voice carried reassurance and care. The older girl touched his face lightly, a gesture of thanks that melted his heart. The younger girl pressed a small hand against his chest, as if trying to carry a piece of him with her. In that moment, words were not necessary. Everything they felt and everything he felt was clear in their silence. The girls were led gently toward the group. The rancher walked beside them for a short distance, watching their steps, making sure they were safe. He did not let his own sadness overwhelm him. Instead, he focused on their comfort, their understanding, and their trust. The girls turned back once, looking at him, and he waved softly, holding onto the last image of their faces in his mind. When they finally left, the rancher stood alone in the quiet fields. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the land he had worked so hard to care for. The cabin felt empty again, the animals quieter than usual. A deep ache settled in his chest. For weeks, he had known this day would come, but knowing it and living it were two different things. He walked slowly back to the cabin, touching the walls, the furniture, the objects that had become part of their shared days. Everything reminded him of them: their laughter, their curiosity, their tiny hands helping in small ways. Even the small gifts they had made were left behind, simple reminders of their bond. The rancher placed them carefully on a shelf, holding each one for a moment, as if by touching them he could hold onto the past. The nights were hardest. The silence returned, heavier than before. Stars filled the sky, but the comfort they had once brought now reminded him of what was missing. He would lie awake, imagining the girls sleeping safely, wondering if they were remembering him, wondering if they were happy. And yet, amidst the pain, there was also pride. He had done the right thing. He had saved them. He had loved them in a way that mattered. Slowly, he began to find peace in the memories. Every laugh, every small smile, every moment of trust became a treasure. He remembered the first day he found them, the careful steps they had taken to trust him, and the small victories of each day that followed. He realized that love does not always mean possession. Sometimes, love means letting go. Months passed, and life returned to a slower rhythm. The rancher worked the land, repaired fences, and tended to the animals, just as he had before. But his heart had changed. It was fuller, even though it carried a quiet sorrow. He remembered the girls in everything he did, seeing their small presence in the way he moved, the way he cared, and the way he looked at the land around him. Even in their absence, the girls left a lasting mark. The rancher had opened his heart to them, and in doing so, he had learned to trust, to care deeply, and to embrace connection once more. His quiet life was no longer defined by solitude alone, but by the memories of the love he had shared, and the knowledge that he had made a difference in the lives of two small children. One evening, as he sat outside under the stars, he smiled softly. Though the girls were far away, he felt them near in the quiet rustle of the wind, in the distant call of a bird, and in the gentle sway of the trees. He whispered a small prayer for their safety, their happiness, and their lives ahead. And though he could not see them, he knew that one day fate might bring them back to him. Until that day, he remained patient, kind, and strong. The rancher had learned that life's greatest lessons often arrive through the care of others, through small acts of love, and through the courage to let go. And in that understanding, he found a quiet strength that would guide him for the rest of his days. Little did he know, the story was not yet finished. The bond he had formed with the girls, built on trust, care, and quiet love, was not meant to end. Life had a way of returning what had been lost, in ways more beautiful than one could imagine. And somewhere far away, the girls were carrying the memory of the rancher who had saved them, a memory that would one day lead them back to him. Years passed quietly on the ranch. The rancher had grown older, his hair showing streaks of gray, his hands rougher from decades of work under the sun. Life had returned to its old rhythm, feeding the cattle, fixing fences, caring for the animals, and watching the vast land stretch endlessly before him. Yet, even in the routine, there was a space in his heart that remained filled with memories of two small girls who had once changed everything. He often thought about them, wondering where life had taken them, if they were safe, happy, and living well with their people. Some days, he would take a walk along the paths they had explored together. He would pause at a tree they had liked to climb, or at the small stream where they had laughed and splashed water. Each place carried their presence, as if their laughter had left a permanent echo. Though he had learned to live with their absence, a quiet longing always lingered. He had once believed he would live and die alone, but the girls had opened a part of his heart that solitude could never touch. Their laughter, their small hands reaching for him, their trust, it had all stayed with him, woven into his daily life in a way that no amount of time could erase. Then one late afternoon, as the sun was beginning to dip behind the distant hills, a sound reached his ears that made him stop in his tracks. It was soft at first, tentative but unmistakable, laughter, clear and familiar, carrying across the open land. His heart skipped and he stood frozen, listening. It could not be real, he thought. After all these years, how could it be? But the laughter came again, stronger this time. Turning toward the sound, he saw two figures walking slowly along the path toward his ranch. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The figures were taller, older, grown into young women, yet their movements, the way they held themselves, the small gestures, they were unmistakable. It was them. The girls he had saved so many years ago. They had returned. He could hardly breathe. His feet felt rooted to the ground, yet his heart raced as he took cautious steps toward them. The young women stopped a few feet away, eyes shining with recognition, with joy, and with love. They did not run to him immediately. They needed the moment to adjust, to make sure he was still the same man who had once cared for them so deeply. Then, in a sudden, quiet motion, the older one stepped forward and embraced him. The rancher felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders in that single hug. The younger one followed, pressing close to him, her hands gripping his shirt as if she were anchoring herself to the safety he had once given them. Tears filled his eyes, though he did not try to hide them. They had come back. They were here alive, and they were here because of love, gratitude, and a bond that could not be broken by time or distance. They spoke softly, words flowing in a language he had only begun to understand when they were children. Even if he did not know every word, he understood the meaning: thanks, respect, affection, and the deep love they felt for him. It was a conversation of the heart, spoken without needing full language. Their eyes, their smiles, their small touches told him everything he needed to know. The young women stayed with him that day, walking the paths they had once explored, touching the animals they had once cared for, and laughing over memories that had survived the years. The rancher listened and smiled, sometimes laughing along, sometimes simply letting the joy of the moment fill him. The ranch that had once been quiet, almost empty, was now alive again with the energy of life, love, and reunion. Over the following weeks, they remained by his side. The bond they had formed as children grew into a deep friendship and mutual care. The rancher shared with them the lessons he had learned over the years: how to read the land, how to treat animals with respect, how to live with patience and understanding. In return, the young women shared stories of their people, of their journeys, of the lives they had lived since leaving the ranch. Evenings were spent around the small cabin, watching the sun set behind the hills. They cooked simple meals together, shared laughter and stories, and sometimes sat quietly under the stars. The rancher felt a peace he had not known in years. The land was the same, the sky was the same, but everything felt different now. It felt full. It felt alive. The young women did not come to stay forever. They had families, responsibilities, and lives of their own. But they had returned not out of obligation, not for comfort alone, but to show the rancher that his kindness, his patience, and his love had left an eternal mark on their hearts. They had grown into strong, independent women, yet they had not forgotten the man who had saved them when they were small, frightened, and lost. Before leaving, they presented him with gifts, small tokens made with care and thought. Not material things, but symbols of love and respect, braided threads, carved wooden figures, and drawings that told stories only they could understand. The rancher accepted them with gratitude, but more importantly, he accepted the connection that would never fade. As they said their final goodbyes, the rancher felt no sadness, only profound warmth. He knew that life had given him something rare and beautiful, the chance to touch lives deeply, to save and protect, and to be remembered with love. The girls would leave again, but they carried him with them, just as he would carry them always. The rancher returned to his daily work, but nothing felt the same. The silence that had once been comforting now felt empty without the echoes of laughter that had returned briefly to his life. Yet he did not mourn. He felt gratitude instead. Gratitude for the years he had spent with them, for the lessons they had taught him, for the love that had flowed both ways. From that day forward, whenever he walked the land, he did so with a heart full of memories, a heart that had been opened and healed in ways he had never expected. He knew that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could create bonds that survive time, distance, and circumstance. The girls had returned, not just for him, but because love has a way of finding its path back to where it belongs. In the quiet moments under the stars, he would often look at the sky and smile, remembering their laughter, their trust, and the feeling of small hands in his. Life had brought him loneliness, hardship, and sorrow, but it had also brought love, connection, and a miracle he would never forget. The rancher had learned the greatest truth of all: love given selflessly does not disappear. It grows, it travels, it returns. And sometimes, after years of waiting and hoping, it finds its way home.